Hello and welcome back to today's video where we are going to do a massive review of Terramaster's new NAS software TOS 5, which has been in alpha and beta and preview for quite a long time and is finally now available to Terramaster NAS users. Now, Terramaster is a brand I have talked about many times here on the channel, and one of the things I've always been keen to highlight is of all the brands that I talk about, at least in terms of network attached storage, very few of them have evolved with the speed that Terramaster has. They don't have a lot of the legacy of your Synologies and your QNAPs, but in the relatively short time they've been around, they have escalated their platform quite quickly, sometimes a little too quickly, it has to be argued. But in today's video we are going to be reviewing the latest full update to their platform there. This is the software that's included with every Terramaster NAS, but there are a few disclaimers about this software and this review today that I do think it's worth touching on before we proceed with the review. The first off, this is going to be a long review. I don't know how long it's going to be now while I'm talking, but I know this is going to be somewhere in the 40 to maybe 60 minutes at least after the edit. So do look at the timeline at the bottom of the video to see all of the chapterizations there for all the different features and services if you want to skip ahead to the part of TOS 5 that you want to learn about. The second thing I want to highlight, and this is probably going to do a disservice to TOS and Terramaster, it has to be said that although they have detailed a huge number of additional features, new and improved features on their own website that are included in TOS 5, I would still argue that even as soon as you update to TOS 5, you're going to realize that some of the big key player applications that you may have been looking forward to, such as Terra Photos, the AI-powered photo recognition, Surveillance Manager, and some of the backup tools, although they are accessible, a good number of them are still beta. They have been improved, and you can still play with them, but I do not think some of these are as good as they could or will be. Case in point, looking at Terra Photos there, again, it's not as responsive as I'd like. It's not dealing with the cache in the background as much as I'd like. And I do find using them a little bit of a bumpy road. The same as the resource sharing within the system could be a great deal better. So although this is going to be a review of TOS 5, and I will be mentioning things like the surveillance application and Terra Photos and the backup applications and Terra Sync, the localized backup tool, it is worth highlighting, and I will continue to say that these are beta in my opinion. And although I'm reviewing the platform, I don't think I can review these apps, at least in this video yet, but I will touch on them. The other thing I will highlight is that Terramaster themselves are very keen to highlight that this new update has been in the works for a long time. It's got 50 new features, 600 new enhancements, and 300,000 new lines of code in TOS 5, which is great. But a number of you who update into TOS 5, it is worth bearing in mind that it is by no means a straightforward upgrade path. You don't just head into the control panel and then from there go into your update area on the system and then update manually like you would normally. It's actually quite a complicated process and requires you to follow some steps where you may feel like you're going to delete all of your data. So be warned that when you are upgrading to TOS 5, at least right now, because of the nature of the update, because this is borderline back-end ROM level update scale, the result is that this is going to be something of a complicated process compared to when you would go through it normally here. Once you've done it via that version of update once, further updates will be standardized. But updating to TOS 5 is not a straightforward process. I'm going to link to this upgrade path here, and I may do a video showing this upgrade path from TOS 4 version, but just bear that in mind. When you're updating, it is not going to be a brief process. But that's enough of those disclaimers. Overall, I've got to say, for those of you that are looking for the TLDR, I like it. I like TOS 5. I think the improvements have shone through. I think it is a very responsive platform here. I think it's shinier as well, and I like a huge number of the new storage and backup tools that have been included inside. I'm not in love with everything. And of course, at the end of the video, I'll go through my pros and cons. But overall, on points, I do like TOS 5. But as you go through this video, I will highlight areas where depending on how you use your system, you might want to hold off updating to TOS 5 right now. But for now, let's crack on with the beginning of our review. Okay, let's start with the obvious stuff. Let's go straight into the design and the responsiveness. So for that, let's log out of this system and take a little look. When you log into the system as normal, you've got going in via the usual IP if you're on the network. You can completely customize this screen you can see here on here. And again, logging in, very straightforward. I will immediately highlight that you can have two-step authentication on this system if you so choose, by going into the control panel and then going into some of the security settings there. So if you choose to, you can go into a user account, or you can go straight into your own user settings menu here and add two-step authentication. Though I will highlight, unless I can be proved wrong, it looked like two-step authentication is only possible with the Terramaster app, and even if you use such as Google's own two-step authenticator, I couldn't seem to get it to sync correctly with the system. So it looks like two-step authentication does require you to use their own application. Now, I will say that the OS is a great deal clearer. The options, there's a lot more unification in terms of the presentation of text. I think certainly they've played with some of the order of things in some of the menus, such as the control panel. I think they're a lot clearer now. Things seem to be in their right area. I will also say that the context menus here on the top of the screen, so for example, if you want your resource information, they are immediately available there. And again, you can play with the layout of these if you choose, or just go straight into the brand new resource monitor. And then brand new resource monitor, I will say, is an enormous jump up for me. It's a good mixture of analytical and simplistic, with a lot of information there on screen as you need it. As you can see, we are utilizing an F4423. This is one of the newer generation NASs from Terramaster for this review, although I will also highlight that at the moment TOS 5 doesn't seem to be available for ARM or ARM based NAS systems, but you can delve pretty darn deep into how this system runs with a resource monitor, to the point where this is probably one of the most detailed standalone resource monitors I've seen for a while, including the analytical information that you can dig down into, individual cores, the memory, disk read-write, IOs, and again, you can configure that and keep historical information to quite an impressive degree there. And again, if anything is in this system that requires additional payment, I've not found it. Everything I've used on this system so far, and everything you're going to see in this review, all seemingly are included with the initial price of your Terramaster, and that will become particularly important later in the video. Now, as you can see, you can also break down into the service area there. You can have a look at individual processes, although I will argue that I think some of the resource monitoring here wasn't quite as up to the millisecond as I would have liked. As you can see, some of the AI and Terra photo processors of that AI recognition could be better. And again, we will touch on resource sharing as well, an area that I think TOS 5 could stand to be improved upon. But I think in terms of a new user accessing their Terramaster NAS, as long as you've ever used even a mobile or desktop operating system, you're going to be able to navigate there. So even right-clicking, we've got contextual menus here. And again, you can alter or change the background very quickly on the fly if you choose. And again, you can do customized ones. You can pretty much do whatever you want, and it does respond very quickly. Now, let's look at account information. Because if you go into the context menu, the control panel menu there, creating batches of new users is very, very straightforward. And again, we can either go ahead, create a brand new user there. Let's call them Charlotte, because we've already got an Alan and a Betty. Give them a department, so we'll go for HR. Give them a password. And again, straight in. Everything's pretty much as straightforward as you'd like. Set them a storage quota, what group they're in if you've created multiple groups there. And again, the process for creating groups is exactly the same. From there, you can then say what folders or services in the system you want them to access and create the user. It's that straightforward and that quick. Now, beyond creating users, I will say that creating shared storage for those users is also very, very straightforward. Whether you want to go ahead and go into the file manager and start creating shared folders, or as we'll touch on later on, if you want to take advantage of new and improved means of shared storage on the system. Now, on the side here, you've got details with each of those applications, who can access what. And again, it's all fairly straightforward and exactly where I'd like to see it within user and software privileges there on the top of the screen. Now, when it comes to if you're utilizing the system and you're having difficulties, one area that I quite like, although I have the tiniest negative point on it, is to do with these ones down here. The technical support option there, the help option, and the security advisor. Now, when you're setting up the device for the first time, I'm sure a number of you are going to be thinking about security. Now, there is other network security areas that I'm going to talk about later on in the network section, but when you set your system up for the first time, by default, you have the Security Advisor tool. You can run it and it will analyze the whole system for any weaknesses that it feels that you should know about and rectify. So as you can see here, it's highlighting that one of the passwords we're utilizing on these accounts is too weak. That's because just for the sake of ease and going in and out, I've just used the word password. The firewall there, I've not set up a sufficient firewall, and as we rescan, it will see if any of the errors that I've, not errors, but any omissions in my security protocol will appear on screen. Now, as you can see, the graphic there for the spyglass is a little bit hinky, and that's another thing I've noticed in the TOS 5 beta. There's just the odd little mar when it comes to the layout of it. Now, TOS 5 has only been available now for a couple of days, and they aren't a company that's the same scale as Synology or QNAP, so it's understandable that their available on-site resources might not be quite as good, and you are looking at a more affordable system, but there's still no denying that there are some areas of the presentation which still do need a little bit of work. Now, security isolation mode I'll talk about later on in the video, and of course I've enabled UPnP. Later on in the network section you're going to see why this is terribly important. Now, say you've ran the security advisor, you've tightened your system, you've followed the guidelines there, but you're still having some kind of difficulty with your system. Well, from there you can go into the technical support section. Now, the technical support section runs into two different key ways in which the brand says they can help you. There's the standard one, as you would expect, a report issue that allows you to generate a report and register a support ticket directly with Terramaster from within the NAS. This isn't unusual. This is something we've seen on a lot of NASes. However, you also have the option of remote assistance. Now, remote assistance is something I've got mixed feelings about, because with the system, you can choose right now, if you've created a support ticket, if they need to get to your system remotely to commit a repair, they might invite you to go into remote assistance, enable remote assistance for a certain period of time, and it will allow a Terramaster support team member to access your server remotely to do some diagnostics and maybe repair in the back end. Now, to people that don't know what they're doing, the less technically versed, and people that just want the storage to sit there, shut up and do its job, this will probably sound really, really appealing. However, once we come out of there, one of the things I'm less keen on is when you set up the device for the very first time, it insists, not asks, it insists you set up a security email. Now, when you set up that security email, you will be invited to verify it, and this won't be used to create a remote access via the Terramaster TNAS online system, which is how a lot of people set up remote access to their NAS very, very quickly. What this is creating just a little back-end connection with Terramaster, and this is the Terramaster tech support enabled to get in, utilizing this access that you've created on your network. Now, why is that important? Well, when I set the device up for the first time, a couple of times I was playing around with the network, I was mucking around with the RAID, something I'll talk about in the storage section, and I got emails sent to me from the Terramaster NAS, automated, saying, oh, your RAID is in need of repair. And that was because I was testing the TRAD system, which is fine. I wanted the system to do this RAID rebuild. I just wasn't expecting an email, given I put the email during that setup section, and there'd been no option to skip that. That same small level of back-end access, I believe, is connected to this as well. And I'm not sure how I feel about that email and that tiny little remote access option being so easily and readily available there. Clearly, it's something only Terramaster have access to, and I know they've introduced the isolation mode, but still nonetheless, I'm not hugely in favour of that, and I don't quite like how easy it is for the more novice user to be able to utilise that. Now, if we carry on looking at the user interface here, we've got those little browser icons there. If we go into the application center, we can install lots of brand new apps in the first and third party. All of these, when they're installed, you can go ahead, let's pick one at random. Let's go for the multimedia server. You click install and it will begin downloading the application. And then boom, it installs it. And from there, you can either choose to add it to the desktop, which is something I've already done, disable it, which is quite convenient, when resource sharing is at its most difficult, and then from there, run the application. And as you can see, it's that straightforward. And again, the multimedia app that we'll talk about later on. But overall, the user interface here, I really, really like. It's definitely a very responsive interface. And they've definitely improved the tightness and the back end there of how the system works. And in terms of visual design, aside from a few blips along the way, I like the new user interface of TOS 5. I do think it's a great deal more polished, but it could still do with a few little changes along the way just to sharpen up some of those icons for a sense of uniformity. Next up, I want to talk about storage in TOS 5 because this is what I think is one of the strongest areas of TOS right now. So when you go into the control panel, you can head here down to the storage manager selection here. But of course, if you go into any one of these, the side options there on the side of the screen. So let's move this and make this a little bit bigger as we talk through this. Now, as you can see here at the top, we are running a T-RAID system. Now, T-RAID is Terramaster's fluid and mixed drive supporting RAID system. Those of you that have ever taken advantage of Synology's hybrid RAID system will be aware of this. It allows you to mix and match drives, and indeed around about a week to 2 weeks ago, depending on when this is published, myself and Eddie worked on T-RAID and did a mixed RAID configuration. As you can see here, we used a couple of 8TBs and a couple of 14s, and T-RAID allowed us to take advantage of the capacity in a way that if we'd only used 8TB drives, used these mixed drive in a traditional RAID 5, we wouldn't have had access to. And again, there are a lot of users, maybe not as many people on day one would use mixed drives, but later on, those of you that are upgrading your systems later on or adding expansions may well take advantage of T-RAID. Just bear in mind, you have to use the 2 RAID configuration in your array at the beginning. You can't adapt and change to T-RAID later on. If you go into the storage settings there, in terms of if you do suffer a RAID failure, firstly, you've got synchronization options to change how quickly the RAID will rebuild. But what's really intriguing is they've also added a fast RAID repair. Now, what that means is, say for example, on this RAID array of all of this data on 27.26 terabytes, I only had 5 terabytes of data distributed over the disks and the rest was empty space. A fast RAID repair will only build the areas of the disks where the data lived. It will just null all the rest of the drive and therefore considerably speed up RAID repairs there. Again, this is something we saw Synology introduce, and indeed we saw ZFS systems like TrueNAS and QUTS introduce a while ago, but Terramaster have introduced it very quickly indeed. So again, it's little storage advantages like that I really, really like. Now, as you would expect, the usual options are there. You've got SSD cache implementation with NVMEs if you choose. You've got the option to add a drive as a hot spare to be available in the event of a RAID failure and your system goes into degradation. External storage with USB drives can be accessible here, and if you've got multiple ports, multiple drives can be added. And unsurprisingly, these can be accessed via the file manager very, very easily indeed. Now, again, you can choose to encrypt these if you choose to. You can choose to do a number of different things and change access for different users to that drive very quickly on the fly if you choose to. And there's just lots of different options built into the storage manager that feel very intuitive. Now, virtual disks and things like iSCSI and stuff like that have been improved in this new version of TOS. For example, in the iSCSI manager, creating a new target and some LUNs to live on them is very quick indeed. For example, we've got a 200 gig area of remote storage there. If we create a brand new one, we'll call this one not test, what we do, twat there. That's what you get for typing without your keyboard in front of you. I hope someone gives me shite for that in the comments. If we go down there, make it just a nice easy 100 gig LUN there. We're saying it's on the first volume. We can carry on. We can change the provisioning, set access either to everyone or customize it for different users if we choose. All of that can be done very quickly in different software levels. And again, click confirm, and our new LUN is ready to rock. And as you can see, straight away, it's accessible via that target. And if you use something like an iSCSI initiator here, for example, on Windows, you would be able to map into that very, very quickly indeed. Now, the iSCSI manager there also allows you to kind of patch it into other areas of the storage on the system that we'll talk about later on. And certainly when it comes to managing the overall storage of your system, Terramaster have improved other things on their system. One of the ones I probably like the most is their support of Hyperlock Worm. It's write only, read many. Now, I've already created a worm locked volume right here, and what that ultimately means is that the data inside is committed to it, but it can't be altered. So you will be able to read it from multiple users, but it locks the storage. So for example, if we created that volume, we can't create a brand new volume sadly because we used up all of our space. But during the process, if we delete this worm here, so let's delete it. Silly me there. Unfortunately, we can't delete the worm that easily because of that anti-deletion policy there. But take my word for it that when it comes to utilizing the read once write many volumes, it will allow you to not only create an area of storage that can't be deleted accidentally, but on top of that, you can change the retention period and protection period on that volume if you choose to in terms of the data inside, and therefore stop data from being changed or fully deleted for a certain period of time that can be adjusted at any time. Now, unsurprisingly, Terramaster have continued to support BTRFS with its shared folder recreation performance benefits, and of course improved snapshot creation as well, with lower impact on resources there. But snapshots have been improved in a couple of other ways here on Terramaster's platform there, with a couple of new improvements in terms of how snapshots are generated, how they're catalogued, how they're duplicated, and more. And again, all of them can be done very quickly and ran very quickly on the fly, thanks to BTRFS's reduced impact on the overall system. When snapshots are being created, it allows you to action these snapshots a great deal quicker with a lot more frequency. And yes, they will make incrementally more space, but at the same time as snapshots are being created with lower impact, it means you're going to have more ways to revert to old data if need be, without worrying too much about how much it's hurting your system long term. Now, carrying on, in the areas of storage that I've talked about here, it's worth highlighting, going back into the storage manager, that drives and the display of drives on screen is a little better than it was before. Not only going into T-RAID, showing you the available drives and storage there, but going into the hard drive monitor, they've kind of improved how drives are displayed there on screen. Again, if you're using Seagate drives, you have the option of IronWolf still, and running smart tests is very straightforward and quite customizable sometimes. Hard drive information with benchmarking tools, such as if we chose right now, there's an NVMe in the system here, we can go ahead and run a benchmark if we choose to. So as you can see, not only can we run the tests as you would expect on there, but on top of that, we can go ahead and on that NVMe, run ourselves a benchmark, as I tried earlier on, and there you go, it will run a benchmark. It's that straightforward. Moving slightly away from the storage itself, we can talk a little bit about how you would interact with the storage typically. Now, we've already touched on earlier on the iSCSI manager there, if we want to create some kind of remote level access storage blob or block. But there's also the option to take advantage of a number of different file services. Now again, most of this is not new to TOS 5, but it has improved how the options are displayed, and indeed some of the other protocols that have been expanded on. All all of the ones that you would expect from SMB to FTP and some of the Mac-centric ones as well with AFP. On top of that, WebDAV server creation is a great deal more straightforward than it was in TOS 4 before it. Now, heading into the network settings there, if you are going to be setting up remote connections to your data, do bear in mind that you want to keep things secure. So later on, when I do start talking about network settings and network protocol and protection and security, do take heed of that before you go ahead with playing with different kinds of file level access storage. But if you choose to, you can always still access this system via the web browser and take advantage of the file manager. Now, a lot of NASes supply in-browser file folder level access. And again, this is not something unique to Terramaster and not something new in TOS 5. But I will say they have certainly tightened up a lot of the options here. They've tightened up how the information is displayed, certainly how responsive it is. Although I will say that thumbnail generation, I feel could still be a great deal better. If you go into certain files, the creation of thumbnails is not as quick as I would have liked to have seen. So if we double click a photo there, we've got a picture of me at some cricket because I'm English and apparently that's how we roll. But after that, we can't really do much more than that. We can't dig out information. We can't go into the back end of it. And if we right click the image, we can go into properties and find out a bit more information about it. But that's really it. And later on, when I talk about the multimedia section, you'll see why there are certain areas of TOS 5 where, if anything, they've doubled down on file folder management and not really gone into the more tailored level stuff. But from here, we still have quite a lot of options open to us. We can choose, zip, create archives, choose to share these files. We can cut, copy and paste. If we share a file, we can create passwords, numbers of users, how long the files will be supported for in terms of remote level access. As you can see, what we can do is go ahead, create ourselves a share if we choose to. From there, we've made that protocol there. We're not going to add any explorations. And boom, we've now got that share ready and available in the My Shares section there. On top of that, if we go into the options there at the top, we can go ahead and create a new shared folder quite easily. And again, we could have done this in the control panel as mentioned earlier on, but still nonetheless, the options are still there to very quickly create a share if we choose to. Again, I'm just going to type that there so I can see my keyboard, choose where we want it. This time we'll stick it in that WRM, that hyperlocked worm. Go ahead there, say whether we want to encrypt it or not, whether we want a recycle bin that will empty on a schedule, whether we want to set limitations by different users, groups or other, who can access it and to what degree, whether they can have read-write access, storage quotas that this new folder can hit, so we can choose that it will never expand beyond a certain size. And that's it. It's that straightforward to create shared folders. Again, nothing new in TOS 5 and indeed in NAS in general, but certainly more responsive than previous versions. And again, there's lots more options in creating some of those and looking after some of those remote access folders from within this range of services. The file folder management is good, and I've added some remote level access, a cloud drive here, and a USB, and create some shared storage here, and it's all accessible via that file manager, and of course the Terramaster mobile app TNAS for iOS and Android. Next up, I want to talk about the network and security, because let's face it, Terramaster NAS has had a bit of a kicking in 2022 after they were hit by the Deadbolt ransomware attack. Of course, they weren't alone in that. QNAP and Acerstore were hit by this, and Terramaster themselves, when they were hit with a back-end ransomware attack that allowed a push command to go into their system, they got a lot of flack for having the admin account on their systems not being disabled by default. I'm pleased to say that the admin account on the system is disabled by default, and again, you can't even access it from here. This account here is a super user account, but this is my own named admin account there. This isn't the admin account. And of course, one of the first things we should talk about on the system is to talk a little bit about the network isolation mode. The isolation mode, I've got to say, is something that I've not really seen from any other brand. I've never seen it on another Terramaster, and I'm really surprised that it's not something we've seen more often. Let's open this tab up a little bit. Isolation mode is a single one-touch button here, and what this does is completely sever all internet level access to the system, indeed, with the exception of local access, and indeed you can still control those to a certain degree, as well as applications that are utilizing PHP on Python 3 or JDK, as well as eliminating remote command level access over SSH. Turning this on kills all of those connections immediately. Now you can choose to run that all the time. Indeed, the security advisor actually recommended that you utilize that at all times. Just turning it on will allow the system to only work in LAN mode. It will have the apps running, but it will disable all those other access points. And for a number of users that want to take advantage of their Terramaster NAS, but want to be totally sure that there's no external access at all, you can enable that feature very quickly there. Now, we've already talked about some levels of secure features. We talked about the two-step authentication earlier on that was accessed via that user account there or going into the settings menu. We talked a little bit there earlier on about when the system is being remote accessed, either via the technical support or if you're going to be using the TNAS option there. But there are other ways in which the system either arrives with the ways to be as secure as possible or with the means for you to add certain services. So if we go into the network settings there, we can see that what we can choose to do is force the system to only utilize HTTPS connections. On top of that, you can add existing VPN connections if you have a VPN provider to hand, or you can utilize the new VPN app via VPN server to create those tunneled access points to the system. And again, you can add multiple if you choose, but of course do bear in mind that the majority of these do have their own funded subscription fees on board. But they do still have lots of configuration options that you can add to that are completely limited to the TOS 5 system there. Indeed, when you are utilizing the system online, you can go down to the secure settings here, and it will allow you to change a number of the forced security policies on the system. So if the system is erroneously accessed by a user with incorrect passwords, you can change just how long they have to wait before they go in. You can add new SSL certificates as needed and secure certificates, and you can adapt firewall settings as and when you need to. Although I will say I'm a little disappointed that Terramaster haven't added a number of helps, guides, question marks and tips throughout this process. Why do I say that? I don't pretend that networking and data storage isn't something that isn't technical. I do think it's technical, and I do think you should spend a lot of time learning about what you're doing before you institute certain data security or network security policies that may hurt or hinder your own access. However, the Terramaster systems are a great deal more affordable. They're a value series in comparison to a lot of other NAS brands, particularly in the desktop sector. And because of that, I think a lot of buyers of these systems may not be quite as well versed as some of the other more technically minded users out there. Consequently, I think they are the users that need guidance on these things more before they start blocking things off and then finding either that services cease to work or that they accidentally cut off their own complete access to the system. Nonetheless, a lot of the other options and settings recommended by that security advisor earlier are indeed recommended. I would, and they would too. The option of preventing DOS, denial of service attacks, the ability to cater your auto block in case you're concerned about someone trying to get into your system and just trying to brute force their way in. These options are nice and clear, and they're in the tabs that I would expect to find them on there. Again, a lot of the remote access settings, not just the TNAS one I mentioned earlier on, but others are indeed turned off by default. And I do think that is a very important distinction, because the previous version of TOS, some of these settings were left on for the convenience of end users. And I do think, although I've turned some of them on, the fact that the majority of them were switched off is on balance and on point probably the best option overall when it comes to setting up the device in advance, and people don't really know what they're doing. Now, As mentioned, I'm not hugely in love with that two-step verification by the looks of things, unless I can be proven wrong. Only working on the Terramaster app, I'm not a fan of having an independent app to do my two-step verification. And I will say that the lack of guidance on a lot of the security features after this is a little bit of a problem. But on the whole, I've got to say TOS 5 feels like it's more secure than previous versions of TOS, and certainly has more capabilities and options built into its user interface in the GUI to allow you to create and craft and maintain a much more secure NAS system. And talking about long term, let's talk about backups and synchronization on these systems, because a lot of people, once again, over the last few years, continue to buy network attached storage devices and not really take on board that they're only a backup if you use them as a backup. If you're sending files from mobiles, from tablets, from laptops to PCs, from multiple users all to the NAS, and then you delete them from those primary systems, you no longer have a backup, because the only copy of that file now exists on the NAS. So much like other hard drive and NAS vendors, Terramaster have included a huge range of ways in which you can create your perfect multi-tiered backup strategy, but moreover done so on their system with the ability to cater it to your own individual needs there. Not just operating systems, but whether you want to introduce cloud, whether you want to go for whole system backups, block-based backups, or simple file folder. So let's go through each of those options. So first and foremost, if you want to back up the entire contents of your NAS, that's an option now. You can choose to back up the whole system configuration in case you want to reset it. It's a small thing, but a number of users like to refresh their OS with a fresh copy of Windows and refresh their NAS with the full copy of their operating system, which is something you can do here. On top of that, you can go ahead and use some of the other backup tools. Now, one of the new one is called centralized backup. Now, centralized backup allows you to back up near OS level backup systems. I've already got this backup app running on this desktop here, and you have to download the centralized backup tool for your own default system there, but still nonetheless, centralized backup at least now introduces the option to install a client application. Sorry about the black screen, I had to give admin ruling. You can now back up a system client to the NAS, and again, there are different systems supported and different OSs that you can choose to back up to. Unsurprisingly, there isn't an option currently for Mac, and there is an option for VMware, but again, there's only the standard two, VMware and Hyper-V supported, although you can use default file system kind of connected IP to IP connections if you choose to. And again, you can run these nice and quick and go through your catalog of backups, as well as cater and change backups very quickly on the fly. But just bear in mind that in most cases, you will need to conduct the settings on your client device, not on the NAS. Centralized backup is what the client app on your PC system or server or virtual machine will be pointing at. You'll have to do all of that from this site. So although this seems a little Billy Basic, that's why. Now, moving ahead from that, we can then talk about some of the other ways in which you can synchronize the system. So much like Synology have Drive and QNAP have QSync, Terramaster now have TerraSync and the TerraSync client. Now these, once again, are comparable to the likes of Synology Drive. This is how to create a shared folder on your system, which is then visible on the OS level file folder access. You're able to create a folder that lives here on your desktop PC, and you can stick that on multiple team members that are all using the same team folder, and that team can then start interacting with the files, adding to it and editing it. Now, I couldn't find too much information on the subject of the shadowing of files when files are being accessed by more than one user, but I would like to hope they've updated some of the settings on that for this. Adding a team folder is quite straightforward. You can use an existing one or create a brand new one in the file manager. So say we go for span dupe. From there, we've added that team folder there. And from those team folder, we can choose what the versioning that we want to do. So we can go in, and if there have been continued updates, I've gone for a daily update here on another app and a live sync here. The result is that you will be able to check out versions of files and revert to them. But once again, some of these applications, such as TerraSync, are still in beta, and therefore, for me at least, I do feel that they still need a little bit more work, and therefore I can't really review this beta application. The TerraSync client that you install on different devices, NAS to NAS or otherwise, will allow you to cater and alter a lot of the settings on your connected client hardware in order to synchronize. And again, this is still not a completed application in my opinion, and I do think it's getting there, but it's not quite there. Then you've got the option for USB backup, so you can go ahead, utilize the USB drive on your system and create a USB backup routine. That USB backup routine will allow you to choose what direction the backup's going to be in, NAS to USB, USB to NAS. Then you can choose which folder you want to back up to and from, so span dupe. You can then choose which folder you want to back up on the USB. And then from there, you can go ahead and select a file there, and boom, you can go ahead, move forward, and you can start backing up quite easily. Proceeding forward allows you to go ahead with what kind of versioning you want. You can go for every time it's a backup, it's a brand new directory, or mirror it so the two areas on the NAS and the USB are the same, or differential backups where only changes on one will affect the other. So if you're having a backup folder, perhaps one of the team folders in your TerraSync directory that's shared by lots of team members, the result will be that it will only back up to the USB, or vice versa depending on your setup, the files that have changed. So the first backup is massive, and then after that only the changed files will make a difference. And again, you can create file filters in case you don't want certain files to be included, or that you always want certain files to be included, which is quite useful for size and more. It's that straightforward to now create a cloud backup. Next, cloud synchronization will allow you to connect to cloud client such as the Google Drive. And again, these things have existed, but now they have improved upon. They'll allow you to add a multitude of different cloud services and synchronize and connect that storage directly to your NAS, and it will be visible here from within the file management center there. Again, a lot of these settings can be changed very easily, and the responsiveness of TOS 5 throughout all of this has been pretty darn good. Finally, you've got the backup area where you can immediately see a lot of you can oversee a lot of the connected systems and services all within this single portal window. So for those that aren't aware, rsync is when you have two remote servers communicating either via the network or remotely via the internet, although that's a little trickier. You can go ahead and create a portal between these two and conduct those backups very easily. This is very good for creating NAS to NAS backups, and I have made a lot of videos about the synchronization tools in Terramaster, and again, they've just been improved in their presentation here on TOS 5. Then you've got the file system snapshots, which can be conducted. So now not just atypical snapshots of different files and folders, but whole system snapshots are now currently available, and again, they can be actioned very quickly and all done there in the background, and you can revert if you choose to very, very easily. Then Apple Time Machine options are built in here, so you can synchronize your Mac systems to tunnel their Apple Time Machine backups directly to the NAS. And once again, you can go ahead and decide how many backups you want to store over time, how much space you want them to keep hold of, and more, as well as the directory that they're going to live within. Then you have got the TFM backup system, which I understand, but I'm less enthusiastic about, and it seems to be more of an internal backup system. I personally question the point. It's got those normal options that we saw on the USB, and again, it's not dissimilar to the USB backup option, but for me personally, it just feels like still continuing to put all your eggs in one basket. All of the options are there, but for me, TFM backup, I've yet to see how I would integrate an in-system backup of this means into my own personal setup there. Snapshots, as mentioned, easy to revert between, and these are the file managed backups, and then you've got those TerraSync and USB clients. But ultimately, between all of these, that means that in TOS 5, you have got the whole system and server backup option in centralized backup. You have cloud synchronization that will allow you to integrate easy access to third-party cloud providers and more into your backup routine. You've then got USB backups which can be set up very, very quickly and easily. Then you've got the TerraSync client and TerraSync server tools, again, that can be utilized with desktop as well. They'll allow you to access and create shared file folder areas, which I know are more about synchronization than backups, and they're not the same thing. But once you integrate them all together, the result is that you can have multiple devices sending data live, and more importantly, without too much work by the end user, and the NAS have the means to back these all up internally or to third-party clouds, or synchronizing with other NASes, or with TFM's internal file folder backup systems. It may look a little bit no frills, and having all of these tools in different places may seem a little confusing, but TOS 5 does seem to have really doubled down on the number of backup and synchronization tools that are on offer. Now, for all of the good things I've said about TOS 5, I will say at this juncture that there is one area where I do believe they've taken their foot off the pedal a little bit. I do think they will improve on this, but of all the NAS brands out there, I think Terramaster is one of the weakest when it comes to multimedia. Now, unsurprisingly, a number of you, let's get the right option there, unsurprisingly, a number of you, when you buy and look at the cost of Terramaster NAS, you buy them because they seem to give you a lot more value for money on the hardware, and what you're prioritizing is third-party hardware. Perhaps you want to use MB as a server there, or you want to use Plex Media Server. Again, very, very easy, very, very straightforward, and as you can see, very easy to add and install, although I'm just enabling them. I've already installed them in advance, and creating a brand new Plex Media server is very, very quick. You click on it, opens a new tab, you register the server with your Plex Media server account, and then from there you can start cataloging and adding things. I'm not going to go into detail because that's not part of TOS 5 directly. I've done videos on how to set up a Plex Media Server NAS on Terramaster, and I recommend you check them out. Now, MB's the same, new tab, all opens up there, and again, you can create your new MB Media Server. You can even go ahead and create an iTunes server very, very easily there. So again, what is my complaint? Well, put simply, those are third-party tools. Although the Terramaster iTunes server one isn't, the bulk of the key, most popular, and the one tools that you're going to use the most are third-party. Now, they have got the multimedia server, we've talked about that before, and although they've tweaked it in a few ways, it's still not new. But this is more about DLNA. This is to make the system visible on your local area network. Indeed, if we go in here, you can see that it is now visible as a network location. And if I try to access it as a media server, after I think it's about 20-30 seconds, it will appear here. That's great if I want to stream the multimedia in some preset files on the TV in my front room, and indeed you can go into the media indexing and index the right folders so you can make sure the right media lives in the right folders. That's great. But there isn't a lot of tailored access. Unlike Synology, QNAP and Acerstore, they don't have a dedicated video application, which when you're talking about 4K media with metadata scraping as well, with covers and trailers and accessing data in a tailored fashion, not having it here is a pain. There is the iTunes server that we've mentioned, but they don't have their own generic audio player there. They have a third-party download stations which you can use for RSS feeds and podcasts, but you would still need to use third-party tools and third-party hardware in order to access it. You wouldn't be able to use a Terramaster app to catalog it so your third-party client hardware can pick it up. Now, a number of you are almost certainly shouting about Terra Photos, and you're right. Terramaster have added a new AI recognition powered photo management tool. Again, we've let it scan a bunch of photos that I've got that I've used in other videos, and if we find a photo of someone here, so we can go ahead, and that's a photo of a chap called Chris, we can go ahead and put his name in there, nice and easy. Perhaps if I could see my keyboard, it wouldn't look terrible. And we click confirm, and it adds it. But it doesn't feel very smooth. And again, it is a beta. I mentioned in my introduction, I'm not going to judge this harshly. It's a beta. But all too often I would use it and it would hang. The system's handling of caching in the background could certainly be better with these applications. They've certainly addressed it and added ways and means on other applications to make sure that the system resources are being allocated effectively. But on this application, I didn't feel like it was running as smooth as it could. Again, I can remove all of those, the text there on screen if I choose to, nice and easily. And indeed, if I want to rebuild the database, I can do that by going back into the control panel. Then I can go into media index, and if I choose to, I can re-index the whole media collection or add new directories if I choose to. But still, nonetheless, I do feel that Terraphotos isn't completed yet. I can open up a file, great. Sometimes the file won't open, as you can see there. Other times I'll open a file and it would work, but I wouldn't be able to access the back-end information. The personal space and public spaces, they have general areas where they will crawl, but the app doesn't feel finished for me yet, and therefore I don't feel I can include it in the multimedia tools currently available in TOS 5. I was really excited to see pet recognition. You may have noticed I've got quite a lot of photos of my cat. On top of that, the person recognition and facial recognition is there, but sometimes it wouldn't show anything, and other times it would show loads. And indeed, when I go to the photos I've taken of my time with TOS 5 for the written review, you can see that after a while it did start cataloguing everything. It gave me lots of ways in which I could merge people, I could access more photos of people, and it did learn over time. There was even the ways to make smart albums utilizing the filter on the side. But all the time, it just kept feeling like something was amiss, and I would have to refresh the page, as you would see there, and then it would rebuild the database, but sometimes it wouldn't. Sometimes I would go into the video section and it would show me all of my videos with thumbnails, and then those thumbnails would disappear. It is still an application that is in beta, and I get that, but still nonetheless, it only highlights the fact that when it comes to TOS right now, it's lacking some features that I would have liked to have seen. And again, we can tailor things, we can download, but we can't do really anything with transcoding, we can't change anything. It's a good tool, but by no means complete there as far as my opinion is concerned. Now, again, multimedia isn't going to be the be-all end-all for everyone, because you've got access to those third-party tools that I've just mentioned there in the form of MB and Plex Media Server. But I do think TOS 5 could stand to gain from a few multimedia applications there on the ground floor. And that's really it for my review of TOS 5. As far as I'm concerned, this is an upgrade. Graphically, it is an upgrade in terms of storage management. A lot of those storage features and services that you've got access to very early doors on the platform. I do think a lot of the backup options have been vastly improved upon, and I do think it is certainly a more secure platform, not just because of things like the isolation mode, but also because the system in general seems to have really taken to heart a lot of the issues that were faced in TOS 4 with regards to security. However, I don't feel like TOS 5 is the complete package yet. I think there are still certain slight omissions and little tiny bumps on the road that I think may stand out more for users that I think in TOS 5 is going to be a complete and 100% ready to go package. I think a lot of that goes to applications that are still listed, as mentioned, as beta. For example, I barely took the time to touch on Surveillance Manager. Why was that? Well, I kept hitting a wall just trying to add cameras. I would disable applications, I would go in, it wouldn't let me add the camera. Likewise, there were some applications like Terra Search that for me, when I would try to add certain features or functions, such as trying to create a new one, let's call that one test, and then from there selecting a folder, going into my photos folder, from there adding it as a photo directory, and click index, it wouldn't let me add it. And it was little things like that where I knew some of these applications were in beta, but I do feel that Terramaster could stand to maybe advertise some of these features as certainly beta right now. They've gone to some tremendous lengths on their forum to highlight a lot of the features of TOS 5 and all the new bits and bobs that are being included in the system, but I do feel that you could stand to maybe shout a little bit louder that that feature is supposed to be still in beta, as you can see there. But apart from that, TOS 5 is a very good platform, and I do think Terramaster have really put the hours in to improve their Terramaster operating system. Should you upgrade right now? Well, there's nothing in TOS 5, in TOS 4 right now that is as good as TOS 5. I think everything in my upgrade from TOS 4 to 5 for this video, it broke nothing on my TOS 4 directories and all the other background stuff. So upgrading to TOS 5 to take advantage of the new storage features, the new security features, and some of the new synchronization features, the security panels and isolation and network mode are going to be to your benefit. But if you do upgrade to TOS 5, do bear in mind that some of the more fully featured AAA applications such as Terraphotos and Surveillance aren't complete yet. And if you do upgrade to TOS 5, just know that what you are getting is a more secure, polished, fluid and faster version of TOS. Just don't expect the new applications to be just as good quite yet. Now, if you have enjoyed this video, there should be a full written review on TOS 5 over on NAS Compares, linked in the description very, very soon. I'm currently up to about 80 odd photos, and I think it's going to get to maybe 150 as I make my way through all the different features and services, with some of which things that I didn't mention in today's review, such as the USB dongle support there, how to go ahead with some of the notifications and more. So I do strongly recommend that you check those out. But otherwise, TOS 5 right now is a good platform. Just bear in mind that when you do install it, although TOS 5 works, some of those applications could still do a little bit more work there. And bear in mind that the upgrade path is not as straightforward as you might feel it is. So do bear that in mind. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this really long video. And if you didn't use the chapters and you watched this whole thing, well, more credit to you. I owe you a beer. Let me know when I see you. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Click like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to learn more as we delve deeper into Terramaster's new TOS platform. Take advantage of the free advice section linked in the description on NAS Compares. And I will see you next time.